The Midnight Train. Chapter 1. The Town and the Ritual. In the small town, everyone knew about that train, but no one spoke of it. Riverside was one of those places the world had forgotten. Population 743, a single main street, 2 churches, and 1 station. The station building had been constructed in 1892, and not much had changed since then. The red bricks on its facade had faded over time. The tiles on its roof had shifted out of place, but the station still stood, because that train still came, every night at exactly 2:47. Thomas Mercer had arrived in town 37 years ago. He was a young man then, 23 years old, his eyes filled with hope, and in his suitcase were half-finished poems. He had fled from the big city. He never told anyone why, but everyone could tell he was running from something. People had a certain look when they were running. They constantly looked back, searching for threats around every corner. Thomas had that look. On his first night in town, he had rented a room at the boarding house. The room was small, its window facing the station. That night, as he was about to fall asleep, he heard a whistle in the distance, deep, melancholy, long. Then that familiar rhythm on the rails, tuck, 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 tuck. Thomas had rushed to the window. In the dim lights of the station, he saw a train emerging from the darkness, long, black. Its cars were old, but carried a certain grace. It was a steam locomotive, the smoke from its chimney appearing silver in the moonlight. The train had slowly approached the station, but it hadn't stopped. It never stopped. It simply passed through, disappearing back into the darkness. The next morning, Thomas asked Mrs. Hawthorne about the train. "Ah," the old woman said, averting her eyes, "the midnight train." "Does it pass every night?" "Yes, every night, at exactly 2:47. "Where does it come from? Where does it go?" Mrs. Hawthorne remained silent for a long time. Then she only said this, "Mr. Mercer, some questions aren't asked. That's the first rule you'll learn in this town." Thomas had been in town for 37 years, and he still didn't know where that train came from or where it went. Now he was 60 years old. His hair had turned completely white. Deep lines had settled into his face. The hopeful gaze of the young man had long since vanished. But he still woke up every night at exactly 2:47 and watched that train from his window. Was this a habit, or was this some kind of spell? He didn't know. All he knew was that when he heard that whistle, a strange uneasiness stirred within him. He felt like he was missing something. But what? The other residents of the town knew about the train, of course, but for them it was just a fact, a part of their lives, like the sun rising every morning, the bells ringing every evening. The midnight train would come, pass, and go. That was all. But for Thomas, it was different. That train was telling him something. Every night, with that deep whistle, it was sending him a message. And Thomas had been trying to decipher that message for 37 years. The station master, old Harold Whitmore, didn't even record the train in his logs. There was no such service in the train schedule. Officially, there was no train passing through Riverside Station at 2:47. But still, every night, Harold would be at the station.
In his small office, his stove burning, drinking a cup of tea, he would look out the window, waiting for the train. When the train came, he wouldn't stand up, wouldn't rush to the door. He would just watch. Watching the train pass was almost a sacred ritual for Harold. One night, Thomas had gathered the courage to ask Harold, "Harold, why don't you record that train?" Harold had looked at him for a long time. Then he answered, "Because that train isn't here, Thomas. You know that too." "What do you mean it isn't here? We see it every night." Seeing and being there are different things. Thomas didn't understand this answer, but he didn't ask any more questions. There was also an old woman in town, Eliza Ashford. She was 92 years old and known as the town's oldest resident. Eliza's house was right next to the station, the edge of her garden touching the rails. Every night at 2:30, Eliza would go out to her garden and sit in her old rocking chair. She would cover herself with a blanket, hold a warm cup of milk in her hands, and wait. When the train came at 2:47, Eliza would smile gently. She wouldn't wave at the train, but her gaze would follow it, as if there was someone she knew on the train. After the train passed, Eliza would take a deep breath, stand up, and go inside. She never said anything to anyone about the train. But one night, Thomas had seen her in Eliza's garden. He approached the old woman, sat beside her. "Eliza," Thomas said softly, "you wait for that train every night. Why?" Eliza looked at him. Her eyes were cloudy, but carried a deep wisdom. "Because that train," Eliza said slowly, "will take me one day too." Thomas's innards churned. "What do you mean?" "Everyone boards that train one day, Thomas. Some early, some late, but everyone boards." "So you're waiting for it?" Eliza smiled. "No, I'm waiting to be ready." After this conversation, Thomas began to look at the train differently. Perhaps this wasn't just a train. Perhaps this was something else, a passage, a threshold, the boundary between the known world and the unknown. But still, the restlessness inside Thomas wouldn't subside, because he didn't know if he was ready or not. He had been in this town for 37 years. For 37 years, he had been looking out the same window. For 37 years, he had been hearing the same whistle. But still, he felt like he was missing something. And that night, everything changed. Chapter 2. The Decision. That night, the air was different. Thomas could feel it. There was an electric tension in the air, like the heavy silence before a storm. But the sky was clear. The stars were shining, and the full moon covered everything with silver light. The air was warm. He had left his window open. A very gentle breeze was blowing from outside. The curtains were swaying gently. It was 2:30. Thomas was lying in his bed, looking at the ceiling. He couldn't sleep. Actually, he could never sleep at those hours. His body had learned the same rhythm for 37 years. Wake up at 2:47, watch the train, and then try to sleep again. This cycle had never been broken. But tonight was different. Thomas got out of bed, went to the window. He looked at the station. Harold's office was lit. In the garden of Eliza's house, he could see the old woman's silhouette. Everything was normal, just like every night. But still, something was different. Thomas had made a decision. Tonight, he would board that train. The decision hadn't come suddenly. Perhaps he had been making this decision for 37 years. Perhaps that first night, the night he came to town, when he saw that train, he had made the decision. But only now, tonight, could he accept it. Why? Why tonight? Thomas didn't know. All he knew was that he couldn't wait any longer. He couldn't watch from the window every night anymore. He couldn't accept that he could hear that whistle and do nothing anymore. He needed to find the answers. He needed to learn where that train came from and where it went. And the only way was to board the train. Thomas took off his pajamas, put on an old pair of pants and a shirt. He tied his shoes. He put his wallet in his pocket, took his keys. He walked toward the door. Then he stopped. Would he come back? He couldn't help but ask himself this question. If he boarded that train, would he be able to return? Or was this a one-way ticket? Eliza's words came to mind. Everyone boards that train one day, Thomas. But was Thomas ready? He couldn't know, but it didn't matter anymore. Ready or not, he had to go. He left the room, quietly descended the stairs. The front door of the boarding house squeaked slightly, but no one woke up. He stepped outside. The air was cold, but it was a pleasant cold. The stars were overhead, the full moon illuminating everything. He began walking toward the station. The streets were completely empty. Riverside slept at night. Only the distant barking of dogs and the rustling of leaves could be heard. Thomas's footsteps echoed on the stones of the sidewalk. In a few minutes, he reached the station. The station building was illuminated with a dim light. Harold's office was still lit. He could see the old station master's silhouette. Thomas stepped onto the platform. The old wooden benches glimmered like silver in the moonlight. The rails stretched into infinity, disappearing into darkness in both directions. Thomas walked along the platform, sat on a bench, and began to wait. It was 2:43. 4 minutes left. Thomas took a deep breath. His heart was beating fast. His hands were trembling. Was he afraid? Perhaps. But he was also excited. For the first time in 30 years, he truly felt alive. 2:44. 3 minutes. Thomas looked around. He could see the garden of Eliza's house from here. The old woman was there, as always, sitting in her rocking chair, the blanket over her, the warm milk in her hand. But tonight, Eliza was looking at him, looking directly at Thomas, and smiling. Thomas waved at her. Eliza nodded her head slightly, made a greeting gesture. 2:45. 2 minutes. Thomas stood up. He walked along the platform, came to the edge of the rails. He looked into the darkness. He couldn't see anything yet. He couldn't hear anything yet. But he knew the train was coming. 2:46. 1 minute. And then he heard it. That familiar whistle, deep, melancholy, long, coming from the depths of the darkness. Then the rhythm on the rails. Tuck, tuck, tuck. Thomas's heart beat even faster, his breath caught. Was he afraid? He had to be ready. 2:47. The train emerged from the darkness. First, Thomas saw only a light. The locomotive's headlights, 2 bright lights cutting through the darkness. Then the train itself. Black, long, graceful. The steam engine, smoke coming from its chimney, its pistons moving rhythmically. Behind it were 5 cars, old but beautiful. Their windows were illuminated with a dim light. The train was slowing down. Thomas's breath caught. The
train was slowing down for the first time. For 37 years it would pass and go, but tonight it was slowing down. Would it stop? The locomotive passed by Thomas, its steam engine breathing as if alive. Then came the cars, the first car, the second car, the third car. The train was slowing down more and more. And it stopped. It stopped right in front of Thomas. The door of the fifth car was in front of Thomas. The door was closed, but it had a handle, an old metal handle. Thomas hesitated. Was this real? Or was this a dream? Perhaps he had actually been sleeping for 37 years, and all this was a dream. But no, this was real. The coldness emanating from the train's metal was real. The hissing of the steam engine was real. The smell of coal was real. Thomas took a step forward. He reached out his hand, grasped the door handle. It was cold. He slowly turned it. The door opened. Inside was illuminated with a dim light. There was a narrow corridor, closed cabin doors on both sides. At the end of the corridor was another door, most likely a passage to the next car. Thomas stepped inside. The door closed behind him. A soft click was heard, and the train began to move.
Chapter 3. The First Car. When the train began to move slowly, Thomas was still standing in the corridor in front of the door. His heart was beating fast. What had he done? He had actually boarded the train, and now the train was moving. Was there a way back? But it was too late now. He had made his decision. Now he could only go forward. Thomas looked at the corridor. It was narrow and long. This was an old train. The walls were covered with dark wood. The ceiling was low. Dim yellow lights hung from the ceiling, placed at intervals. The floor was covered with an old carpet. The patterns had faded. There were 7 doors along the corridor, 3 on the right, 4 on the left. Every door was closed. There were no numbers on the doors, just plain dark wood. Thomas approached the first door. He listened. Was there a sound coming from inside? No, it was silent. He grasped the door handle, turned it. The door opened. Inside was a small cabin, a bed, a window, a sink. The bed was made with white sheets on it. Looking out the window, only darkness could be seen, rapidly passing darkness. The train was accelerating. The cabin was empty. Thomas closed the door, moved to the next one. When he opened the second cabin, he found it empty too. The third cabin was also empty. Thomas was slowly progressing through the corridor. Were all the cabins empty? Were there no passengers on this train? But when he opened the fourth door, there was someone inside. An old woman was sitting on the edge of the bed, gray-haired, wearing a thin dress. She was looking out the window at the darkness. When Thomas opened the door, she turned, looked at him. "Excuse me?" Thomas said. "I don't want to—" "You're not disturbing," the woman said in a soft voice. "This place is as much yours as it is mine." Thomas hesitated at the threshold of the cabin. I was just—" "You're curious," the woman said. "Normal. Everyone is curious when they first board." "First?" The woman smiled. "If this is your first time boarding, yes." Thomas entered the cabin. How long have you been on this train?" The woman shrugged. "Time has no meaning here. Maybe a day, maybe 100 years. It doesn't matter." "But where are we going?" The woman looked at the window again. "We're all going to different places, but we're all traveling on the same train." Thomas tried to understand this. "I boarded from Riverside, a small town. Do you know it?" "I know. I boarded from there too, 73 years ago." Thomas's eyes widened. 73 years? But you look old, don't I? The woman smiled. You don't age on this train. You only change. Thomas couldn't say anything. His mind was confused. This woman had been on this train for 73 years? How is this possible? My name is Margaret, the woman said. You? Thomas. Thomas Mercer. Pleased to meet you, Thomas. If you sit down, I'll tell you some things. Thomas sat on the other end of the bedded. The car was swaying slightly. The rhythmic motion of the train could be felt. Outside, through the window, only darkness was passing. No lights, no shapes. This train, Margaret said, is not an ordinary train. You've already figured that out, haven't you? Thomas nodded. This train, Margaret continued, is the train of memories, the train of regrets, the train of the journey between the past and the future. I don't understand, Thomas said. Margaret looked at him. Her eyes were tired but kind. Boarding this train is easy, but getting off, to get off, you need to be ready. Ready? For what? To let go. To let go of your past. To let go of your regrets. To let go of yourself. Thomas's heart ached. I just wanted to find answers. And you will, Margaret said. But answers are never quite what we think they are. There was silence. The tuck-tuck of the train, the gentle swaying of the car. Margaret turned to the window again. I boarded this train 73 years ago because I was afraid to live my life. I had made a mistake, a big mistake, and I ran from that mistake. I boarded this train because I thought the train would take me away from that mistake. Did it? Margaret nodded. But it also took me away from myself. For 73 years, I've been wandering these cars. Each car is a different memory. Each passenger is a different story. But they're all searching for the same thing: forgiveness, learning to forgive themselves. Have you forgiven yourself? Margaret smiled. Almost. I'm very close. I'll get off at the next stop. When is the next stop? I don't know, but I'll feel it. When I feel that I'm ready, the train will stop and I'll get off. Thomas thought about this. So this train really was a passage, from the inner world to the outer world, from the past to the future. But to make this passage, you had to let go of some things. Thomas, Margaret said, why did you board this train? Thomas hesitated. Why had he boarded? To find answers? Out of curiosity? Or was there something else? I don't know. I just watched this train every night, and I felt like I was missing something. What were you missing? My life, maybe. I've been in that town for 37 years, in the same place for 37 years. I never moved. I never dared to move forward. Why? Thomas took a deep breath. Because something happened in the big city. I did something, and I ran from that thing. I came to Riverside, hid myself there, and 37 years passed. What did you do? Thomas shook his head. I can't tell. It's too shameful. Margaret put her hand on Thomas's shoulder. Here, she said, gently, everything can be said, because this train listens to secrets and forgives. Thomas looked at her. This woman was a stranger, but Thomas felt he could trust her. Perhaps for the first time in 37 years, he could truly speak. He said slowly, was in love with a woman. Her name was Emma. We worked together at a publishing house. I wanted to be a poet. She was an editor. She was the only one who believed in me, the only one who read my poems, who valued them. He stopped, took a breath. And one day, I confessed my love to her, but she was married, and she rejected me. But she rejected me kindly, with understanding. She said,
Thomas, you're a wonderful person, but I'm married and I love my husband." Thomas's voice trembled. "But I couldn't accept it. I became obsessed with her. I wrote her letters every day, sent her poems. I started to follow her. I waited in front of her house, and one day her husband saw me. We fought. I pushed him. He fell, hit his head." Thomas stopped, his eyes filled with tears. "He didn't die, but he was taken to the hospital, and I ran. That night I came to Riverside. I never looked back. I never learned what happened to Emma, whether her husband recovered. I haven't known for 37 years." Margaret remained silent for a long time. Then she said, "And you've been living with this guilt for 37 years." Thomas nodded. "Thomas," Margaret said, "this train will show you things. Each car shows something different. Maybe you'll see your past, maybe your future, but in any case, you'll find the answers." "And then what happens? Then?" Margaret smiled. "Then you'll decide. Will you get off, or will you continue the journey?" Thomas looked at her. "You said you'll get off." "Yes, because I'm ready now. I've forgiven myself." "How?" "Slowly, with each car, with each memory. And one day I understood that mistakes are what make us human. We don't have to carry them. We can let them go." Thomas thought about this. Perhaps this journey was exactly for this, to let go, to forgive. "Thank you, Margaret," Thomas said. Margaret smiled. "Continue your journey, Thomas. See the other cars. And remember, answers are never quite what we think they are." Thomas stood up, walked toward the door, but he stopped at the threshold, turned back. "Margaret," he said, "will I see you again?" "If we're both ready, yes." Thomas nodded, left through the door. The corridor was still dimly lit. He walked toward the door at the end of the car. He opened the door and passed into the next car.
Chapter 4. The Car of Memories.
The air in the second car was different. When Thomas stepped inside through the door, he immediately noticed. The air was heavier, denser, as if it carried the weight of the past. And there was a smell, old books, dust, and a faint scent of lavender. The corridor of this car was wider and shorter. There were only 4 doors, but these doors were different. There were pictures on them, not photographs, paintings, oil paintings, framed, a different painting on each door. Thomas approached the first door. In the painting was a house, an old white house with a wide porch, a large oak tree in its garden. Thomas recognized this house, his childhood home, the house where he grew up. He opened the door. Inside was a living room, but not just any living room. It was the living room of Thomas's childhood home. Everything was the same. The sofa, the curtains, the carpet, the paintings on the wall. Family photos were arranged on the mantelpiece, and there were people in the room. Thomas's family. His mother was there, in her younger form, in her 30s, her brown hair falling to her shoulders, smiling with happy eyes. His father was there too, reading his newspaper. And there, sitting on the carpet, was a little child, 7 or 8 years old, Thomas. Thomas's breath caught. This was a memory, his own memory. But how could this be possible? Could it be this real? His mother looked at him, smiled. "Thomas, dear, are you ready for dinner?" Thomas couldn't say anything. He just looked. His mother had died 30 years ago, but now she was there, alive, real. "Mother," said Thomas, his voice cracking, Are you real?" His mother tilted her head.
I'm part of your memory, Thomas. You're keeping me here." "I don't understand." His mother approached him. "This car is the car of memories. Here the past lives, but only as long as you allow it." Thomas could truly feel that he was talking to his mother's voice, her scent, her presence. His eyes filled with tears. "I missed you," she said. "I missed you too, my son, but I never left. I've always been here, inside you." Thomas embraced her, or he thought he did, because when he embraced her, his mother slowly blurred, became misty, and disappeared, as if it had been a dream. Thomas was left alone in the room. The family photos were still on the mantelpiece. The sofas, curtains, carpet, everything was still there, but the people had disappeared. Thomas understood. These memories weren't real. They were only reflections, shadows of the past. He couldn't hold on to them. He could only remember. He left the room, returned to the corridor. He approached the second door. In the painting was a schoolyard. Thomas recognized this too, high school years. When he opened the door, he found himself in the schoolyard. The sun was shining, students were running around, and there, sitting on a bench, was a young girl, blonde hair, blue eyes, Sarah, his first love. Thomas approached her. Sarah looked at him, smiled. "Hello, Thomas," she said. "Sarah," said Thomas, "are you also a memory?" "Yes, but a real memory. Do you remember me?" "Of course I remember. You were my first love." Sarah smiled. "And you were mine, but we were children. We didn't know what we wanted." "I know. You moved to another city. I never saw you again. But you never forgot me." Thomas nodded. "No, I never forgot you." Sarah stood up, approached him. "Thomas, you need to let me go." "What?" "You need to let me go. I'm a memory. I'm from the past, and you can't stay in the past." "But I know. It's easy to take refuge in the past, but you need to move forward." Thomas's eyes filled with tears. "But I have beautiful memories in my past. Memories with you. Memories with my family." "And you'll always carry them," Sarah said, "but you mustn't cling to them. Memories don't define you, Thomas. They're only a part of you." Sarah slowly blurred and disappeared. Thomas was left alone in the schoolyard. The sun was still shining, but there were no students, only silence. Thomas returned to the corridor. He looked at the third door. In the painting was a publishing office, Emma's office. Thomas hesitated. Did he want to open this door? Did he want to see Emma? But he knew he had to open it. This was part of the journey. He had to face his past. He opened the door. Inside was a familiar office, desks, computers, bookshelves, and there, sitting at a desk, was a woman, in her 40s, brown-haired, elegant, Emma. Thomas approached her. Emma lifted her head, looked at him, but she didn't smile. "Thomas," she said. Her voice was cold. "Emma," said Thomas, I am so sorry." "Sorry isn't enough," Emma said. "You ruined my life." "I know, and I've regretted it every day." "Regret isn't enough, Thomas. You followed me. You hurt my husband. You ruined us." Thomas's tears flowed. I know, and I can't even ask for your forgiveness. I don't deserve it." Emma looked at him for a long time. Then she took a deep breath. "Thomas," she said in a softer voice, "I need to tell you something too." "What?" "I'm a memory to you. I'm not the real Emma. I can't know what the real Emma felt. But the Emma inside you wants to tell you something." "What is it?" "Make peace with yourself. What you did was terrible, but you've been carrying that mistake for 37 years. Enough now. Forgive yourself." How can I forgive myself? By accepting. Accept your mistake. Accept your regret. And then let go. Because you can't change the past, but you can change your future. Emma slowly blurred and disappeared. Thomas was left alone in the office. He was crying, but this time his tears were different. Not just sadness, but also a relief, as if he had let go of a burden he had been carrying for a long time. He returned to the corridor. There was one more door, the fourth door. In the painting was a mirror, just a mirror. Thomas opened the door. Inside was an empty room. The walls were white. There was no carpet on the floor. In the center stood only a mirror, large, old. Its frame was ornate, golded. Thomas approached the mirror. He saw his reflection, a 60-year-old man, white-haired, wrinkled face, tired eyes. Who was this man? Was this man him? But then the reflection changed. A young man appeared, 23 years old, with hopeful eyes. Thomas saw his younger self. And then the reflection changed again. This time a very old man, perhaps 90 years old, white beard, wrinkled skin, but his eyes were peaceful. Thomas understood. This mirror showed the past, the present, and the future. Who he was, who he is, who he would be. "Who do you want to be?" a voice asked. Thomas turned. The room was empty, but the voice came again, this time from inside his head. "Who do you want to be, Thomas?" Thomas looked at the mirror. The three reflections stood together. The young man, the middle-aged man, the old man. "I," said Thomas slowly, "I want to be at peace. I want to be at peace with my past." The reflections smiled and merged. Only one reflection remained, Thomas. But this Thomas was different. He was peaceful, light. He had no burden. Then the voice said, "Continue your journey." Thomas left the room. He walked toward the door at the end of the car. He passed into the next car.
Chapter 5. The Car of Choices. The third car was completely different. There was no corridor. When the door opened, Thomas found himself in a large hall. The hall ceiling was high. Its walls were covered with mirrors. The floor was laid with black and white tiles, like a chessboard. In the center of the hall was a table, and sitting at the table was a man, middle-aged, in a suit, serious-looking. He was looking at Thomas. "Sit down, Thomas," the man said. Thomas approached the table, sat across from him. "Who are you?" "I am the sum of your choices," the man said. "Every choice you made has shaped me." "I don't understand." The man placed a deck of cards on the table. "These cards represent the key moments of your life. Each card is a choice, and now you will see those choices again." "Why?" "Because you can't build your future without understanding your past." The man turned the first card. On the card was a picture. Young Thomas standing at a bus stop with his suitcase. He was leaving the big city. "This moment," the man said, "is the moment of escape. You ran from Emma, from the mistake you made, and you went to Riverside." "Yes," Thomas said. "What else could I have done?" "You could have stayed. You could have faced it. You could have gone to the police, told everything. You could have served your sentence, and then you could have found real forgiveness." Thomas nodded. "I know. I was afraid." "Fear imprisoned you for 37 years. The man turned the second card. On the card, Thomas was sitting at the boarding house in Riverside. He was looking out the window. "This moment," the man said, "is the moment of stagnation. You came to town and froze. You stayed in the same place for 37 years. Why?
Because I was safe there. No one knew me. My past couldn't catch up with me. But your future couldn't exist either. You only existed. You didn't live. Thomas accepted this. He was right. For 37 years he had only existed. He hadn't truly lived. The man turned the third card. On the card, Thomas was standing on the station platform, looking at the train. And this moment, the man said, is the moment of change. You decided to board the train tonight. Why? Thomas thought. Because I couldn't wait anymore. I needed to find the answers. Which answers? I needed to know who I was. I wasn't just a prisoner of my past. There could be a future. The man smiled. That's the right answer. You were ready to change. The man gathered all the cards, handed them to Thomas. Now you choose. Choose what? Your future. These cards represented the past, but now you will choose your future. Thomas took the cards. He held them in his hand. They were heavy. Then he drew a card. The card was blank. What does this mean? Thomas asked. This, the man said, means infinite possibilities. Your future isn't written yet. You will write it. Thomas placed the card on the table. But how? I'm old. Most of my life has passed. Age is just a number. You can still make choices. You can still change. You can still live. Thomas thought about this. Perhaps he was right. Perhaps it wasn't too late. So what should I do? This car, the man said, is the car of choices. Here you see your future choices, but be careful. These are only possibilities. The real choice is yours. The man stood up and pointed to the other side of the hall. There were 3 doors there. Each door was a different color: red, blue, black. Each door represents a different future. The red door represents return to the past, returning to Riverside, continuing the same life. The blue door represents a new beginning, going to a new place, building a new life. And the black door represents the unknown. You don't exactly know what it is. Thomas looked at the 3 doors. Which one should he choose? Do I have to choose now? No, but you can see behind each door. Then you can decide. Thomas approached the red door. He opened it. Inside was the town of Riverside, the boarding house, the station, the familiar streets. Everything was the same. And Thomas was there in his old room, watching the train from the window. 38 years, 39 years, 40 years. Nothing was changing. The same ritual, the same routine, the same stagnation. Thomas closed the door. No, this couldn't be his future. He opened the blue door. Inside was a new city, big, lively, full of lights, and Thomas was there, not young but not old either, in the middle. He was running a small bookstore, talking with customers, recommending books. He was smiling, really smiling. And in the evenings, when he closed the shop and went home, he was writing poems. Not old poems, new poems, about life, about forgiveness, about starting over. Thomas watched this future. It was beautiful. It was peaceful. Perhaps this was the right choice. But there was still the black door. Thomas closed the blue door, approached the black door. He put his hand on the handle. He hesitated. The unknown was frightening, but it was also exciting. He opened it. Inside was darkness, but not complete darkness. There was a faint light in the distance, and Thomas was walking toward that light. He didn't know where he was going, but he was walking fearlessly, and with each step he felt lighter, as if he were letting go of a burden. He was letting go of the past. He was letting go of his regrets. He was letting go of himself. And the light was getting closer and closer. Thomas closed the door. He took a deep breath. "Have you decided?" asked the man. Thomas turned, looked at him. "No, not yet, but I know I won't choose the red door." "Good," the man said. "That's already progress. But blue or black, I'm not sure." "Then," the man said, "continue your journey. Perhaps you'll find your answer in the next cars." Thomas nodded. On the other side of the hall was another door, the passage to the next car. "Thank you," Thomas said. The man smiled. "I'm a part of you, Thomas. You're thanking yourself." Thomas walked toward the door. He opened it. He passed into the next car.
Chapter 6. The Car of Others. The fourth car was completely silent. When Thomas entered, he heard no sound. Even the tock-tock rhythm of the train had disappeared, as if time had stopped. The corridor was narrow again, but this time there were no doors, just a long corridor stretching into infinity. The walls were transparent, like glass, and behind the glass there were people. Thomas slowly moved forward. He looked at the first glass panel. There was a woman, old, sickly looking. She was lying in a hospital bed. A man was sitting beside her, holding her hand. Thomas recognized this woman, his mother, her last days before she died, and the man beside her, his father, 30 years before. But this time Thomas wasn't there. In the room were only his mother and father. Where was Thomas then? Then he remembered. In those days, Thomas was in Riverside. When his mother was on her deathbed, Thomas was hiding in town. He hadn't even gone to her funeral because he was afraid. He was afraid that if he returned to the big city, his past would find him. Thomas's eyes filled with tears. He hadn't been able to see his mother one last time. He hadn't been able to say goodbye. He looked at the second glass panel. There was Emma, in the hospital, sitting by her husband's bedside. Her husband was lying in bed, his head bandaged. Emma was crying. Thomas watched. A few days seemed to pass, but only in a few seconds. Then the husband woke up. He was injured, but alive. He was recovering. Thomas breathed a sigh of relief. The husband hadn't died. At least he hadn't killed him. But then another scene appeared. Emma and her husband, sitting in their home, silent, uneasy. There was a tension between them. The husband was looking at Emma, asking questions. Who was that man? Why was he following you? And Emma couldn't answer. She felt guilty. She felt responsible. She thought Thomas's obsession was her fault. Thomas knew this was wrong. Emma wasn't guilty. Only Thomas was guilty. But Emma didn't know that, and she had lived with this guilt for years. The third glass panel. There was another woman, young, blonde, Sarah, his first love. Sarah was sitting in a park with a man, a handsome man, well-dressed. Sarah was laughing, happy. The man was proposing to Sarah, and Sarah was saying yes. Thomas smiled. Sarah had been happy. This was beautiful. But then another scene. Sarah, now middle-aged, sitting in her home. She had a husband and 2 children, but something was missing. There was an emptiness in Sarah's eyes, as if she had missed something. Perhaps she was remembering Thomas. Perhaps she was remembering her first love, and she was asking herself, what if? Thomas thought about this idea. Yes, perhaps he could do this. Perhaps it wasn't too late. So what can I do now? Thomas asked. Now, the young man said, you can truly change. You can't change the past, but you can change the future. And perhaps you can ask for forgiveness from those people. Perhaps you can visit your mother's grave. Perhaps you can write a letter to Emma, apologize to her, but also tell her she wasn't guilty.
Thomas thought about this idea. Yes, perhaps he could do this. Perhaps it wasn't too late. "Thank you," Thomas said to the young man. The young man smiled. "I've always been inside you, Thomas. Just don't forget." And the young man slowly blurred, disappeared. Thomas walked to the end of the corridor. There was one more door, the last par. He opened it and went inside.
Chapter 7. The Last Car. The last car was completely empty. When Thomas entered, he saw nothing, just white emptiness. No walls, no ceiling, no floor, just whiteness. And in the center, a single chair stood. Thomas approached the chair, sat down, and waited. A minute passed, maybe 2, maybe 10. Time had lost its meaning here. Then he heard a voice, but this time not from outside. It was coming from inside himself. "Thomas." "Who is it?" Thomas asked. "I am your inner voice, your conscience, your soul, yourself." Thomas remained silent. "You have learned many things on this train. You've seen your past. You've seen your choices. You've seen your effect on others. Now you need to learn one last thing." "What is it?" "To forgive." "Who do I need to forgive?" "Yourself." Thomas's eyes filled with tears. "How? How can I forgive myself? I did terrible things." "Yes, you did, but you're also human. Humans make mistakes. What matters is learning from those mistakes and changing." "But I wasted 37 years." "No, you waited 37 years. You waited to be ready, and now you're ready." "Ready for what?" "To live again." The white emptiness slowly began to change. Colors appeared. Landscapes formed. Thomas saw a window, and through the window a city appeared. But this wasn't Riverside. It was a new city, a city he didn't know. "Where is this?" Thomas asked. "This is your new beginning, if you choose." "The blue door?" "Yes." Thomas looked at that city through the window. It was beautiful. It was lively. And somewhere there was a life for him, a new life, a clean slate. "But," Thomas said, "I need to return to Riverside first. I need to settle some things." "Like what?" "I need to visit my mother's grave. I need to write a letter to Emma, and I need to say goodbye to Harold and Eliza." The voice smiled. Thomas could feel it. Then the voice said, "The train will take you there. But remember, when you return to Riverside, don't stay there. Just say goodbye, and then start your new life." "Okay," Thomas said. "I accept." The white emptiness slowly darkened, and Thomas found himself inside the train. But he was no longer in the cars. He was in a seat, a normal passenger seat. He looked out the window. The train was approaching the station, Riverside Station. Dawn was breaking. The sky was filled with pink and orange colors. The train slowed down and stopped. Thomas stood up, walked toward the door. The door opened. He stepped onto the platform. The station was the same. Old red bricks, broken tiles, cracked benches. Harold's office was still illuminated with a dim light, and in Eliza's house, the old woman's silhouette could be seen. Thomas looked at them. He smiled. He needed to say goodbye.
Chapter 8. Farewell. Thomas went to the boarding house. His room was the same. His bed, his desk, his window. Everything was as it had been for 37 years. But now it felt different. This wasn't his home anymore. It was just a temporary stop. He took out his suitcase, gathered his belongings. He didn't have much. A few clothes, a few books, his old notebooks, his poems.
Thomas took his poetry notebooks in his hand. He had written these 37 years ago. Young, naive, romantic poems about love, about pain, about loneliness. He opened a page, read, "I lost myself among the shadows. Time froze, heart fell silent. I searched for you at every corner, but you were only an illusion." Thomas smiled. It wasn't a bad poem, actually. Perhaps he should write again, but this time differently. About life, about forgiveness, about starting over. He closed the suitcase, went downstairs. Mrs. Hawthorne was in the kitchen, preparing breakfast. "Good morning, Mr. Mercer," she said. Then she saw his suitcase. "Are you going somewhere?" "Yes," Thomas said. "I'm leaving." Mrs. Hawthorne was surprised. "Leaving? But you've been here for 37 years." "I know, but it's time to go now." Mrs. Hawthorne looked at him. There was an understanding in her eyes. "The train?" she asked softly. Thomas nodded. "Yes, I boarded the train." Mrs. Hawthorne smiled. "And you came back. That means you're ready." "Yes, I'm ready." "Where will you go?" "I don't know yet, but to a new place, a new beginning." Mrs. Hawthorne hugged Thomas. "Good luck, Mr. Mercer. We'll miss you." "I'll miss you too." Thomas left the boarding house. He walked on the street. The town was waking up. Shops were opening. People were walking. Everything was normal. But for Thomas, everything was different. His first stop was the cemetery. Riverside Cemetery was outside the town on top of a small hill. He walked there. The cemetery was quiet and peaceful. Old gravestones, flowers, trees. He found his mother's grave. It was a simple gravestone, only her name and dates written. Sarah Mercer, 1925 to 1988. Thomas knelt before the grave. His hands were trembling. "Mother," he said softly, I couldn't come. I couldn't be by your side when you were dying, and I've regretted it every day." The wind blew gently. Leaves rustled. "But now I'm here," Thomas continued, "and I want to tell you something. I always loved you, and you were always with me, in my memories, in my heart. You never left." His eyes filled with tears. "And now I'm leaving. I'm starting a new life, but I won't forget you. Never." Thomas stood up. He looked at the grave one last time. Then he turned, left. His second stop was the post office. Thomas went to the post office, asked for an envelope and paper. He sat at a desk, thought, then he began to write. "Dear Emma, I hesitated a lot about whether to write this letter. Perhaps I shouldn't write it. Perhaps I shouldn't stir up the past, but I need to say some things. First, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for what I did 37 years ago. I harassed you, ruined your life, hurt your husband, and then I ran. I was a coward, and I've regretted it every day. But I want to tell you something. You're not guilty. You were never guilty. My obsession, my mistake, my weakness. You were just a kind person, and I misunderstood that kindness. I don't know how your life went. I don't know if your husband recovered, if you were happy. But I hope you were happy. I hope you found peace, because you deserved it. I'm leaving now. I'm starting a new life, and I hope you're at peace too. With best wishes, Thomas Mercer." Thomas put the letter in the envelope, wrote Emma's old address, the address in the big city. Perhaps she still lived there.
Perhaps she didn't, but he needed to send the letter. He dropped it in the mailbox and felt relieved, as if he had let go of a burden he had been carrying for a long time. His third stop was the station. Thomas went to the station. Harold was in his office, as always. Thomas knocked on the door. "Come in," Harold said. Thomas went inside. Harold looked at him, smiled. "Ah, Thomas, I saw you on the train last night." "You saw?" "Of course. I watch the station every night. I saw you board the train, and now you've returned. That means—" "I'm ready," Thomas said. "I'm leaving." Harold nodded. "I knew it. I can see it in your eyes. You've changed." "Yes, I've changed." "Where will you go?" "I don't know yet, but somewhere new." Harold stood up, extended his hand to Thomas. "Good luck, friend. I'll miss you." "I'll miss you too." Thomas left the station. One more stop remained. Eliza. He went to Eliza's house. In her garden, she was sitting in her rocking chair. Thomas approached her. "Hello, Eliza." Eliza lifted her head, looked at him. She smiled. "Hello, Thomas. So you came back from the train?" "Yes." "And now you're leaving?" "Yes. But I wanted to say goodbye to you first." Eliza nodded. "Sit, let's talk a little." Thomas sat beside her. There was silence, only bird sounds, leaf rustles. "Eliza," Thomas said, "when will you board?" Eliza smiled. "Soon, very soon. I'm ready now." "Are you afraid?" "No, I'm not afraid anymore, because I understood. The train doesn't take us away. We board the train because we want to go, and when we want to go, we don't need to be afraid." Thomas thought about this. She was right. The train was a tool. The real journey was inside us. "Thank you, Eliza, for everything." "You're welcome, Thomas. And remember, life is short, but beautiful. Don't be afraid to live." Thomas stood up. He looked at Eliza one last time. The old woman was peaceful, and Thomas knew that the next night Eliza would board that train, and she was ready. Thomas returned to the station. He waited on the platform. It was afternoon. The sun was shining. A train was coming, but not the midnight train, an ordinary train. It was going to the big city. Thomas boarded the train. He sat by a window seat. The train started to move. Riverside slowly moved away. The station, the town, the houses, they all remained behind. Thomas looked out the window. The landscape was changing. Fields, forests, rivers, and with each passing mile, Thomas felt lighter. When night came, Thomas was still on the train. He looked at the stars through the window. The full moon was shining, and Thomas understood. The midnight train wasn't outside. It was inside us. We created it. Our past, our regrets, our fears, they all formed that train. And only when we boarded that train, only when we faced it, could we be free. Thomas closed his eyes. For the first time in 37 years, he was truly at peace. And he fell asleep. In his dream, he saw the train, but this time the train was stopped, and its door was open. Margaret was there, waving. Eliza was smiling. His mother was there, hugging him. And Thomas knew that he could always return, if he needed to. But now, he had a new journey, in the real world, a real life.
Epilogue. New beginnings. Thomas arrived in the new city 3 days later. The city was big. crowded but beautiful. People were hurried, buildings were tall, but Thomas wasn't afraid. For the first time in 37 years, he truly wanted to live. He rented a small apartment in the center, in an old building. His window overlooked a park. Every morning he watched the sunrise, and every evening he wrote poems. He found a job at a bookstore, a small, cozy shop. The owner was an old man, Mr. Richardson. He loved books, loved talking with customers. And when he hired Thomas, he said, "You're a man who understands books, Thomas. You'll be happy here." And Thomas was happy. In the evenings, when the shop closed, Thomas would walk home. He would pass through the park. Sometimes he would sit on a bench and watch people. Children running, couples walking, old people feeding birds. Life was flowing, and Thomas was now part of life. One evening, while sitting in the park, a woman came up beside him, middle-aged, kind-looking. "Excuse me, is this seat free?" she asked. "Yes, please sit." The woman sat. There was silence. Then the woman asked, "Do you live here?" "Yes, I just moved here. It's been a few weeks." "Ah, welcome. I've been living here for years. This is a good neighborhood." "Thank you." The woman smiled. "My name's Linda." "I'm Thomas." "Pleased to meet you, Thomas." They began to talk. Linda was a teacher, retired. She lived alone. Her husband had died years ago. But she wasn't lonely. She had friends, hobbies, a life. "What do you do?" Linda asked. "I work at a bookstore, and I write poetry." "Are you a poet?" "I used to be. Now I'm trying to be one again." The woman smiled. "Poetry is beautiful, the language of the soul." Thomas looked at her. This woman was kind, warm, and for the first time in a long time, Thomas could truly talk to someone. "Linda," Thomas said, "would you like to have coffee with me one day?" Linda smiled. "Yes, I'd love to." And Thomas understood. Life was continuing. The past was left behind, but the future was open. And this time, Thomas was ready. That night in his apartment, Thomas opened his poetry notebook, a new page, and he began to write. "The midnight train has passed. It took my soul, gave peace. The past remained on the rails. The future waits at the station. I no longer fear the darkness because there's light inside me. Each new day is a beginning. Each breath is a gift. I forgave myself, let go of the burden. Now I walk lightly. The midnight train taught me, living is more than just existing." Thomas put down his pen. He smiled. This poem wasn't perfect, perhaps, but it was real, and that was enough. He looked out the window. Night had fallen. The stars were shining, and in the distance, very far away, he heard a train whistle, or imagined it. It didn't matter, because Thomas was ready now. He had made peace with the past. He had met the future, and now all he had to do was live. Truly live.
And in the town of Riverside that night, at exactly 2:47, the train came again. There was no one on the platform, only Harold watching from his office, and Eliza sitting in her garden. The train slowed. It stopped. The door opened. Eliza stood up. She folded the blanket and left it on the chair. She put the cup on the table and slowly left her garden, walked to the platform. Harold watched from his window, his eyes filled with tears. "Goodbye, Eliza," he whispered. Eliza boarded the train. The door closed, and the train started moving and disappeared into the darkness. Harold took a deep breath. He finished his tea.
Then he said to himself, "Soon I'll board too, but not yet. I'm not ready yet." And at the station, under the dim lights, Harold continued to wait for the next train, to wait for the next passenger. Because the midnight train was life itself, from past to future, from known to unknown, from fear to peace. And the train continued its endless journey without stopping. Tuck, 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 tuck. Forever.